this whole thing. We need to be talking about this. The American people need to be talking about this. We deserve to know this. We deserve to understand how we've gotten this far without a functioning head of state. Guys, we don't have a functioning head of state right now. And there's not an investigation taking place. We need to be talking about this. The American people need to be talking about this. We deserve to know this. We deserve to understand. Perfect. So that's what I don't get. That's where I'm at. That's my issue is we don't have a functioning head of state. We have not had a functioning head of state in a long time. And I want to understand how we're in a position that we've gotten this far and nobody's talking about the fact that this is a fraud that's been committed against the United States. And this isn't some kind of crazy conspiracy theory that we're talking about here. This isn't me saying, I'm not making this up. This isn't some kind of right-wing nonsense, right? Of which there is plenty. Okay, so let's take a look at this story. Let's see here. Dems advance dark theory about Biden that conservatives have been shouting since before 2020. It's stunning to think that some within the Democratic Party and the liberal establishment media didn't see the weekend at Bernie's display of President Joe Biden as anything. Let me just flip this so everybody can see what I'm. We get a Bernie's display of President Joe Biden as anything but that. And yet it seems this could very well be the case. You'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt. Anyway, this is especially true in light of the article Thursday by New York Magazine's Olivia Nuzzi. Now, I'm going to get to the Olivia Nuzzi article because that is something that somehow blew up the lid of the Biden scam so many conservatives have been screaming about since the botched 2020 presidential election. Now, 2 weeks ago, guys, 2 weeks ago? Right before the debate, remember a week before the debate, we had the press secretary up there talking about cheap fakes and they're trying to make the president look bad. And all these Democrats and all of these media pundits came out and they talked about the Biden from behind the scenes, he's sharp, he's this, he's that. You know, you're not in there with Biden. The press secretary literally said, I have trouble keeping up with his ability to work and all this different stuff. And I'm asking, Jon Stewart asked it. Did anybody record that? These people came out. Joe Biden's cognitive abilities didn't just fall off a cliff the night of the debate. This didn't just happen. This isn't something that just popped up all of a sudden and nobody behind the scenes knew that this was the case. That's the problem I have with this. I'm not a Trump fan. I'm not a Trump supporter. I haven't voted for Donald Trump because that's what happens, right? Is right away you get you're a Donald Trump guy, you're MAGA this, MAGA that. No, that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is the fact that we have a president who is not running the country. This is the guy who with the launch codes. And I want to know behind the scenes who's actually making the decisions. Is that a crazy thing to ask? And this isn't just some kind of right-wing conspiracy theory. Okay, there are establishment Democrats now who are saying this is clearly a problem, and we're all just supposed to pretend that they didn't know this until just now. Until now, everybody thought Joe Biden was just fine. Is that what we're supposed to believe? I mean, come on, who thinks that? What is going on with my display here? Who thinks that? Who thinks that up until now, nobody knew that this was an issue? I don't think anybody did. I think you're gonna have a hard time convincing anybody that that's the case. So that's where the problem lies. That's where the issue is. And if we're living in this new era, right, where there's nobody above the law, we're going to take former presidents and we're going to charge them with criminal conspiracy, and we're going to do all these different things, and nobody's above the law and all this, that, and the other. Then I guess the question you got to ask yourself is, minimally, where is the Department of Justice investigation? Where's the investigation? You can't tell me that the Vice President, Kamala Harris, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, all these Treasury, all these people who are in cabinet meetings, who are behind the scenes, who are with the president all this time, that they haven't been directly lying. I want phone records. I want emails. I want to know what the conversations were behind the scenes as President Biden's cognitive abilities were clearly declining. I want to know who knew what, who said what was because there may be a conspiracy. So we talk about J6, right? And incitement and all these things. And I think for the most part, and I know, again, it's going to be, oh, you're a MAGA guy. It's not that. Look, it's thin, right? And what they did was nobody individually. So if you understand kind of how they built this case, nobody individually committed a crime. What they're saying is because all these people were talking to each other in an interstate way or across state lines and to challenge election results in all these different places. They're bringing in a RICO case. They're calling it an attempt to defraud and overturn the election, all that kind of stuff. Fine. Okay, great. You can't tell me that there's not that kind of communication going on behind the scenes when it comes to protecting Joe Biden. You just can't. You're not going to convince me that there's not some paper trail of people saying that we're going to not have this public conversation about Joe Biden's mental health. We're not going to talk about this. And if that's the case, which I'm positive it is, if that's the case, for God's sakes, we've got to get to a place where we're doing some kind of investigation, and we need to know who is running things behind the scenes. That's how could anything else be any more important than that right now? We have a conflict taking place in Israel that has the explosive potential. We're fighting a proxy war against Russia in Europe, and we don't have a functioning head of state right now. So, I don't know. You tell me. I'm falling off my chair. All right. World's most unprofessional podcast. Thank you. The beauty of streaming to no one is that you can get away with stuff like that. Okay, so here's the article from Newsy, or whatever her name is. Wild New York Magazine feature detailing a conspiracy to hide President Biden's mental decline claimed elite Democrats have long known about cognitive issues that have been under a microscope since last week's disastrous debate. Here's what kills me about this is, look, I think this is coming from like Fox News, I believe. Yeah. They're calling it a wild New York report. I don't even understand how you could call it that. How would you even refer to it that way? I don't get it. What do you mean wild? How's this a wild? Look, at the end of the day, how do we not? Of course we know that this is the case, don't we? Of course we know that this is what's happening. For God's sakes, of course, a wild New York Magazine feature detailing a conspiracy to hide President Biden's mental decline claimed elite Democrats have long known about cognitive issues. How could elite Democrats not know? How could they not know? How could you be in the room? We all saw the debate. We all saw the interview afterwards. We've all been watching the decline of President Joe Biden over the last couple of years. Of course they knew. This isn't a question. The president's mental decline was like a dark family secret for many elite supporters. She began hearing similar stories from Democrat officials, activists, and donors in January about concerns related to Biden's age and cognitive ability. Following encounters with the president, they had arrived at the same concern. Could he really do this for another 4 years? Could he even make it to Election Day? Okay, great. So can he do it for another 4 years? We're asking that question. That's fine. The real question, though, is he the president of the United States right now? Is he the leader of this nation right now? That's the question we're supposed to be asking. That's really the question that needs to be answered, because at the end of the day, that's what matters right now. Like I said, we've got this conflict in Israel. We've got this conflict. We're fighting a proxy war with Russia in the Ukraine, and we don't have a head of state. Following encounters with the president, they had arrived at the same concern. I read that. They wished that they could whistle past that they knew and emerge in November victorious and relieved, having helped avoid another 4 years of Trump. What would happen after that? They couldn't think that far ahead, she continued. Their worries were more immediate. So this is very telling, because they're essentially saying this. Let me translate that. We don't care about the long-term good of the country. Our primary concern is staying in power. That's the translation of what you just heard there. That's the translation. That's what that actually means. And This is the problem. And this is not something that's going to be unique, right? This is not going to be a problem. This is not an issue that is unique to the Democrats, where they will sacrifice the long-term good of the country in order to stay in power. That's ridiculous. Of course, they will sacrifice the long-term good of the country. And this is the political structure of the United States right now. The political structure in the United States of America right now is one that seeks power. There's nothing more clear to me than there's no message that comes forth more clear than the fact that in the United States, our political structure, and I'm saying in the United States because I don't really care what anybody else is doing. In the United States, our political system is one that is based solely on maintaining power. We have politicians who care virtually nothing for the long-term well-being of the country. They have only the desire to stay in power. And the Biden administration and this article and what they're saying here about immediate worries and not as concerned about the long-term future is a crystal clear explanation of how the political parties view the nation. This is ours. It's ours to play with. And that's it. We'll do whatever it takes. And the consequences, long-term consequences, be damned. We don't care about that. What we care about is staying in power right now. And that's a sad reality of where we are, but it is absolutely the reality. Yeah, that's much better. Much better. Okay, thank you. Been messing with this chair and probably should have got myself in a comfortable position before this thing started, but hey, bear with me. What can I do? All right. What is this? That's weird. Okay. Another story. The election fix is in, but GOP still has a chance to stop it. And bring this story up real quick. You know, I read somewhere once that when you got to start doing these lives, you're not going to be good at it at first. And boy, I'm really living up to that. Rook, the election fix is in, but GOP still has a chance to stop it. Let's take a look at this story. Democrats are against a House Republican-sponsored bill requiring voters to prove they're U.S. citizens before casting a ballot. Republican Texas Representative Chip Roy introduced the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act to protect U.S. elections for the millions of illegal immigrants flooding our border every year under the Biden administration. So, as a libertarian, I have tons of mixed opinions. I have a very mixed view on this thing. I don't like the idea of a federal identification. I'm a small government guy. The idea that you should have to show up to the polling place and be able to prove who you are to vote, I don't find that offensive. I don't know why so many people on the Democrat side of the aisle do. I have a lot of Democrat friends. I don't think they're all a bunch of conspiracy theorists, or I don't think there's part of some grandiose conspiracy where they're hoping a bunch of illegals vote. I've never heard them say that they think illegals should vote. I've heard them kind of trumpet kind of mainstream Democrat talking points about voter ID laws are racist. Nobody wants to actually talk about why they think voter ID laws are racist, which I think is kind of funny. But at the end of the day, that's kind of what you get, is this voter ID laws are racist and so on and so forth. It's an ironic way to view things, because if you think about it, if you go back to the 2020 election, right? You know, Donald Trump, and he's throwing doubt on our institutions and the peaceful transfer of power and all these different things. And I can't help but think to myself that if you really care about the credibility of the institution, let's talk about voter ID and proving that you're an American citizen when you show up to vote. I don't think this is an incredibly unreasonable way to view this, but let me just break this down for a second. If you have a grandiose, like, kind of the number one concern is protecting the sanctity of our institutions, and most importantly, protecting the sanctity of our elections and the peaceful transfer of power, right? If you have voter ID laws and people have to prove who they are when they show up at the polls, there's a chance that there are going to be some people, and I think that number is going to be very, very statistically small. I think it's going to be a statistical anomaly of people who, given 2 years between elections, aren't able to get themselves to a position where they have an identification and they can show up to the polling place and identify themselves. I think that's going to be a very tiny percentage of the American population, infinitesimally small. Like I said, a statistical anomaly. or statistically insignificant is probably a better way to put it. I guess on the flip side of that is if you vehemently oppose voter ID and people having to prove that they're American citizens when they show up, if you oppose that thing while at the same time backing an administration that has admittedly, it's impossible to argue, no matter what you feel like the scope of it is, we have had a large surge of undocumented crossings into the United States. I'll use the politically correct left-leaning term for it, but we have had a surge of undocumented people entering the country. That's a thing that has happened over the last few years. It's undeniable. If you're not willing to at least acknowledge that, then you're probably not in a position where you're going to be willing to have a reasonable conversation about this. I guess my point is that you're going to have a significantly higher number of people who become disenfranchised with the institution, who simply choose not to vote because they don't have faith in the election system because of the combination of those two things, that the party that kind of has allowed a higher number of undocumented crossings in the United States is also opposing making people prove that they're American citizens when they show up at the ballot. So you're going to disenfranchise a ton of voters by doing that. And so if you care about the sanctity of elections, I kind of look at it as saying, well, yeah, we're going to disenfranchise some people who potentially aren't going to be able to get an ID to show up to vote, but we're going to disenfranchise a far larger part of the electorate and shake faith in our election systems and threaten the peaceful transfer of power by not taking some measures to make sure and put some kind of safeguards in place to make sure that we know who's showing up to the polling places to vote. I don't think that's. I mean, I think to me it's a pretty small ask. I think to say, okay, look, we got to at least prove who's showing up, and even if you don't like it, you got to say for the greater good. The greater good is, to me anyway, is you're going to disenfranchise as few people as possible. And again, I don't believe that showing up with an identification and being able to prove who you are I don't think it's that big of an ask. And I don't think that you're going to be disenfranchising or disallowing very many people to vote. So not surprisingly, Democrats are firmly against the SAVE Act, claiming that any justification for the bill is built on falsehoods about our election system. The White House put out a statement Monday morning, and over the weekend, Axios reported that House Democrats plan on bringing out the big guns against the bill when it comes up for a vote this week. The administration strongly opposes H.R. 8281, Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. It's already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. Well, that's the point, though, isn't it? It's illegal, so let's make sure that nobody's doing it. Let's actually... Additionally, making a false claim of citizenship or unlawful. Yeah, we know it's illegal. It's not like it's not illegal. We do have some safeguards in place, but I just don't think that, and not showing up with an ID and proving who you are is this huge ask. When you offset that, when you compare it against probably the issues you're going to have in terms of an election system that people are not going to be. I guess if people having faith in our institutions is important, I don't think it's a big ask to show up with an ID. This is a cool commercial, I guess. We'll skip that. I'll pause this. House Minority Whip Catherine Clark told her colleagues they are urged to vote no on the SAVE Act because it would prevent Americans from registering to vote with their driver's license alone. It would further intimidate election officials and overburden states' ability to enroll new voters. Here's the problem, though. So this is what happens, right? So you get blue states. You get, are we doing something, I guess, because illegal immigrants, I know you don't like that term, undocumented aliens, whatever you want to refer to them, are able to get IDs. They're able to get driver's licenses. So I don't know. I just don't think it's a big ask to show up and prove that you're an American citizen. So it's been an issue. It's to say that the border hasn't been an issue is a lie. So I just don't think it's that big of an ask to say to people, hey, you got to go out there and you got to be able to prove who you are. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's not the end of the world to me. What else do I got here? So there's the magazine. I'm going to end it on this one. Senators ask Attorney General for criminal investigation into Clarence Thomas. And this is one of my favorite things right here. It's not about Clarence Thomas. You know, they take money and gifts or whatever, vacations. I don't know. I don't care about all that. I haven't really even looked into it that much. Two Democrat senators called last week for a criminal investigation into Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, sending a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland asking him to appoint a special counsel to probe the justice amid a series of ethics scandals. Do we really think that when it comes to ethics, does anybody go, yeah, you know what, when it comes to ethics, there's nobody, if there's going to be a standard bearer here, it's going to be U.S. senators. U.S. senators should be the ones. I mean, come on, man. This is with zero sense of irony. Is there any irony here at all in terms of them saying a senator requesting requesting an ethics investigation? These guys are inside trading. They're taking money from lobbyists. They're doing all kinds. The amount of unethical, crooked, illicit. We just talked about in the last segment. I talked about not having faith in our institutions, and I can't help but think that it's almost funny if it wasn't so sad. Does anybody really have faith in the Senate? I mean, if you're on the political left in this country, you're angry at the Supreme Court, Roe versus Wade, all that. I get it. But if you could set aside your ideology of the issue for just a moment, if you could take and set that aside, and you could go, okay, well, aside from that, the ideological differences that we have, do you really view the Senate as more ethical, as they should be the ethical watchdog of the as opposed over the Supreme Court? Do you not view is the Supreme Court not just a couple inches ahead? Now, these are two Democrats going after, of course, a conservative member of the court. It's not going to look good. It's not going to go anywhere. I think it's a bad idea. First of all, I think it's a bad look. Attacking the Supreme Court, I think I don't know if that's going to be a winning strategy for Democrats, but that's all an aside. For me, I just laugh a little bit. It's like these guys are like, White House and Wyden argued accepting gifts without reporting them warrants criminal investigation, suggesting Thomas's actions could have violated the Ethics in Government Act, which makes it a crime to knowingly and willfully fail to file or report gifts and income from outside sources. I mean, what are these guys worth now when they get, from the time they get elected to the time they get out? What's their net? What's the change, the net worth change that these guys are experiencing? Are we really... I mean, is this really where we're at? Do we really believe that any of this is, I don't know, the whole thing just seems ridiculous to me, but maybe that's just me. But that was a funny one to end it on. I don't have a lot else. I'm streaming to nobody, which is always super gratifying. Took me a while to get this set up. Takes me a while to get back on. Hopefully, as I start doing this a little bit more consistent, I can grow some kind of an audience here, and that would be just awesome. For those of you that happen to stop by, if you want to watch the replay all the way to the end, that'd be amazing. And thank you very much. If you're on YouTube, share. If you haven't subscribed to me there yet, please do so. If you're on TikTok and you're not following me and you just happen to drop by, go ahead, please, and follow me on the TikTok machine.